Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Humans on the Verge. Very excited today, as I always am with these, but at the same time, this is a particular meaningful conversation we're going to have today. I've brought into the space this month a gentleman named Stephen Aizenstat. He has devoted his life to understanding the profound wisdom and healing power that exists within each of us. Almost 50 years ago, such an inquiry was a driving force for his creation of the Pacifica Graduate Institute, a graduate school and center for the study of the human experience through depth psychology, mythology, and the humanities. Professor Aizenstat has served as an organizational consultant to leading tech companies, Hollywood filmmakers, lectured, taught extensively on the experiences of dreams and the deep imagination throughout the world. I think he's been on every continent, maybe even Antarctica. We'll have to talk about that. He has collaborated with many world-renowned masters in the fields of mythology and depth psychology. Some of you may know these names: Joseph Campbell, big one usually, James Hillman, Marion Woodman, and Robert Johnson. He has pioneered his revolutionary and patented dream tending approach, which is a proven system based on 4 decades of rigorous scholarship and practical applications, and road tested with students and clients and global workshops. These methodologies have helped thousands of people to unlock their creative potential, increase intellectual and emotional bandwidth, which God knows we need so much of that these days, and of course, realize people's personal and professional goals. He has seen his own work and the work of others that through our dreams and imagination, we are able to access limitless creativity and innovation, improve relationships, and ultimately our collective human potential. I met Steve in 2002, probably, while pursuing my master's at Pacifica Graduate School. He spent a few days teaching us the foundational ideas and practices of his dream tending method in that program. But in the summer of 2017, 15 years later, I took another piece of his work, which is a weekend that you can do. It's called the Introduction to Dream Tending. And it was the reason I pursued it was because I was in a huge transition in my life. You could say I was a human on the verge at that time. And I wanted to tap into a way to serve something new that I could feel wanted to emerge through me. I was done with my solo show. My memoir had been out for 2 years, and I was lost in that betwixt and between space that so many of us do in life phases, what we call the liminal in our world. And I knew that I wanted to create something that was fully aligned with my heart and soul, but would also serve the world. And so I went for this 3-day weekend, and I witnessed the most incredible work. I witnessed how this work facilitates deep personal healing. I watched it with my own eyes, and also was holding the emerging edge of what the collective human story wanted to bring forth next. And that's what really, really excited me about this work. It's like, how do we tap into that? Of course, I want to do personal healing on myself and others. I mean, that's so much of what we do now in the world. But this call from the future in some way, I really did feel I wanted to connect with that. Having been a student, of course, of Jungian and imaginal psychology, and studying the structures and the power and the effects of both the personal and the collective unconscious, I wanted to learn how to really tap into these structures, how to understand them, how to connect to the powers and the effects of them for myself. But I ultimately wanted to learn how to kind of just see the world through that lens 24/7. I was really, really craving that. And of course, being the daughter of my father, I've got a creative side, of course, but oh my God, the rational part of my mind is so powerful and so strong. And so I wanted to learn how to, oh dear. So I wanted to learn how to, let me start over. My rational mind is one that is so, my rational mind is one that I lean into often to solve and navigate my life. But I was noticing that it was really only getting me so far. You know what I mean? Like I just kept running into the same stuff over and over again. And I knew that when I allowed myself to invite the less rational part of my mind, we could call it the imagination, the deep imagination, I would experience deep insight and integration and healing and really take creative leaps that almost took no effort or muscling. Like that was fascinating to me. How is that possible with all of this efforting I was doing out in my life? So clearly our unconscious minds are untapped reservoirs of wisdom and knowing. The following spring after that, I began Stephen's certification in dream tending. And that's pretty much where I've been the last 7 years working with him. I'm honored now to be a member of the Academy where I help support his students, present students, his curriculum. Also, we get to have conversations like this in public, which is always wonderful. And really excited also because last fall, I believe it was last fall, end of the year, Stephen's new book came out, which is called The Imagination Matrix: How to Access the Greatest Power You Have for Creativity, Connection, and Purpose. And so today, Steve and I hope to introduce how the power of the unconscious through dream work and other methods that he teaches can support and bring more clarity, more juice, more creativity, more generativity to your and my and all of our waking life. So welcome, Steve, after that long introduction, but I felt it was necessary to kind of create the stage for this particular conversation because you and I could go a million directions in it. But I wanted to hold the space in a way so that we could really bring people into an understanding of this work that you do, that I do, and why it's so right for these times. And what I would love to do is to start with an understanding of how all of this started for you. Like, what were the breadcrumbs? And I always picture, like, you know, Lord of the Rings, like, Gandalf shows up in the wagon, or we discover that the back of the wardrobe has a portal to another land. What were some of your breadcrumbs as a young man that led you to actually even pursuing depth psychology and dream work?
Oh my. Well, it's the breadcrumbs that you mentioned, so we can start back. And the figure that comes forward, it's going to be different, interesting, is a person that I met when I was 12 years old. Yeah, 12 years old. And as a 12-year-old, we were living in the San Fernando Valley, right, outside of Los Angeles. And we'd go over the hill and we would go to Malibu Beach. And that was a big deal for us. And right next door was Zuma Beach. And
I know it well.
you
Yes.
know it well. They're lifeguard stands, they're big food stands. I mean, that was the migration everybody went. And so just many, many families. And, my mom, my dad, hey, this is a great place. It's safe. Just stay within proximity so we can see you. Okay. And, it happened. It just happened one day. The breadcrumbs, right? Who would have thought it? Almost always when something evolves, and now looking back, it's really pretty obvious. So the tide, it's a big civilized beach, very much so, big parking lots, whole gig. And there was a jetty. And of course, the public beach was on this side of the jetty. Well, the day that we're at, there was a huge low tide, what they call minus tide, that went way out far, and the jetty exposed itself even more fully, and I could walk, or somebody could walk around to the other side of the beach. And of course, we were always told, stay on this side, stay where the lifeguard stands. Well, my
Yeah.
curiosity, whatever it is.
12-year-old
So,
curious boy,
yeah,
of course.
12-year-old, so I had to do
Yeah.
it. So I went around that jetty. I'm sitting on the other side. I'm walking, and it's marvelous. First, it's a wilderness-like place, which is, evokes so much. And second, with the ocean out, all the reefs were up, and you can see the rocks, and even there's some coral there, and tide pools. It was really
Mm.
extraordinary. And I'm just sitting on one of the rocks, just walking down just a bit. And I'm just noticing. And I'm in my imagination. And I'm just really so curious and so quiet at that moment when, first breadcrumb, when I hear a voice from behind me. And the voice simply said, "Did you know that rocks could talk?" Rocks could talk. Well, as a child and as many children, we go into our imaginal play, and often we'll have ideas, fantasies. We'll see it in a movie.
Well, everything can talk when you're a kid.
Everything can talk when you're a kid. I mean, I knew that. Of course, it wasn't really shared in that way when I was in school,
Right.
right?
Yes.
With my
Yes.
parents, not quite like that. I was
Yeah.
I was amazed, and I thought, shoot, I know that, but I didn't know. And then I looked around, and it was a god, really. And and what I mean by that, I was 12. This must have been a 16 or 17-year-old surfer guy, right?
A Zuma Beach surfer god.
A Zuma
Absolutely.
Beach surfer guy.
I can see him in my mind's eye.
Oh, totally. And I went, huh, yeah, I knew that, but and that was the moment that the magic was. And I use that word magic, and I want to really suggest that I work with people in all kinds of experiences. So, yes, magic, yes, wonder, and yes, the actuality of the human experience, what it is, and truly and fully, and the pain and suffering and the care and the support that's required. At that moment, though, there was something that happened. It was the turning point, I think, when I look back and follow the breadcrumbs, as you mentioned, back. I think it starts there. And then I notice, of course, that I look up and I notice that the tide is coming back in, and I have but a minute to stand up quickly and phew, run to the other
Wow.
side. And it's the classic moment, Kelly. I mean, we all know it. You're 12, your parents say, "So where were you?" Where was I? What am I going to say? Well, I was in a magical place where rocks talk, and there was this, no, no, no. I was just wandering about and present here now, because it's
Yeah.
hard to translate the language what we're going to be talking about into ways that are really, full. Even though most all of us do understand at different levels, it's difficult to give articulation sometimes to people that are, occupied with all kinds of other noticeable and realistic and important concerns of life and career.
Yeah, but it's so interesting because, it was you were in a natural setting. And I
Mhm.
find that nature is the most common denominator of this experience, even if it's just a moment of feeling connected to the forest or the moment, or the bird song suddenly brings you back into the present moment, whatever it is. And yeah, I mean, our society wants us to just kind of hunker down, and we're just in survival problem solving mode all day. But you can't be human without having or those moments, or at least remembering them also from childhood. So I do think that is always a great portal for anyone who, when we talk about, like you said, when we use the word magic, it feels like that. It feels like we did walk through the back of the wardrobe suddenly, and some other reality has been present. And it's something I drop into my stories and my storytelling all the time. Also, because it is those moments when uh I do find it's the Robert Frost moment where you see that there is another path, or there's another way of seeing or being in the world, and that if you lean forward into it, um, uh, uh, life gets interesting.
Well, it does. And it is a different quality of awareness. Some people would say consciousness. And particularly in a technological age that we're all part of now, things are a lot influenced by screen and screen time. So to touch in to the natural rhythms. And curiously, that happens in a nature place, also happens often in the city place when we let go, just what you're noticing, that kind of
Yeah.
rational intention, the urgency to get someplace, the familiar path to go in a direction, to let go and to really be present. I mean, we all know it. We do. I mean, we're
Yeah.
walking down a path. There's two ways, right? One way of walking down the path is we're counting calories. Hmm? We're walking down the path and
Oh,
we're
we're also counting steps.
and steps, got to count the steps. Or we're rehearsing what the agenda of the day is, right? We're going in that mode and it's reasonable. I do it. I get it. And two, just as you're saying, there's another way of walking, and we all have a sense of it. We're walking without the agenda, and we're allowing the wind through the leaves, as you were noticing, the songs of the birds, and we follow that. Well, how often do we give ourselves the gift of moving and walking in that way? And then our body opens differently, our breath deepens, and we're in a different way of being present. And the curious thing is that when I'm with people and working in that way, from leadership teams with CEOs to little children to people that are in all kinds of workspaces now, because I do a lot of consulting in this setting or that setting. When we drop in there, creativity opens, imagination begins to blossom, and it really gives us the ease and the creative possibility to do our jobs even that much better and stay connected to our humanity.
Yeah. What's so interesting and what I've really gotten from the depth of studying this stuff, both through the personal and the intellect, of course, is that our amazing minds, brains slash psyche, whatever configuration, they're just trying to figure out, like, what is this consciousness thing? Is it brain? Is it derived from the brain, or is consciousness? Are we just an antenna with the brain? Like, we haven't figured that quite out yet. But I know the experience of it is that no matter what, we all have these two ways of being in the world. And I know, like, Ian McGilchrist is a big person right now who talks a lot about that. His amazing book called The Master and the Emissary, which talks about these right brain, left brain. So we are hardwired for both of these ways of seeing. But our culture and our evolution as a society and collectively has kind of narrowed our thinking, or narrowed our experiencing of it. And what I find so interesting is, having studied Carl Jung and his opening to this way of seeing, and really, I mean, Freud and a couple of other big thinkers around the turn of the century were really the first ones who were interested in, there's something else operating in people, that there's another driver somewhere. There's another
Mhm.
bus driver somewhere. And Freud focused it on his theory, but Carl Jung had a really interesting experience in his life that didn't come to light until, almost 100 years later. Um, and so I'm so interested in that, just that kind of initial understanding as even humans, that we've only really been understanding a rational explanation of the unconscious for the last 100 years. And yet clearly humanity has been tapping into both sides of these thinking since day one.
Mhm.
How do you talk about that and kind of hold that space for people to understand even what the unconscious is?
Yeah, well, I'm hearing two parts of what you're asking. One is, just to put it way overly simplified. Yeah, we do go into those two places, right? One is a rational mind, another is a curious mind. I mean, the research goes to the place, oversimplification, but very clear and direct. Uh, one quality neurophysiologically of our brains, we can go into that kind of alpha state, which is mobilization, right? And we are going to get the job done, and we need that. I mean, clearly, that's
We
part of
wouldn't be here without it.
we would not be here without it. Then we wouldn't have gone through the extraordinary achievement of human experience. The other part of the mind brain physiology has to do with the theta place, and that's different. That's a quiet place, a curious mind versus a more rational mind only. And when that curiosity evolves, something else opens. I mean, truly. And I've had so much experience now working with people in physiological illness, let alone creative impulse. When we are in that relaxed place, that kind of alpha state, something else happens inside, right? Our body relaxes, our mind opens. As I said, curiosity blossoms. That's the place of innovation, creativity. That's why there's such a demand now when I'm working with big corporations and leadership teams, to remember that innovative impulse, that creativity, that quality of life opens a little more fully. It doesn't mean we give up one for the other. It's simply a way of including that way of being, that quality of awareness. And then what you're saying is true. Carl Jung comes along, as well as so many others, and they say, look, there is a way of being in the psyche, in what was framed the unconscious, as a way of being there that we can really participate in that we're one of the many players. When a dream comes, more often than not, people will see themselves in the dream, and we imagine immediately that we're the center of the dream, right? We're orchestrating the dream. We are the ones that are directing the dream. The dream has everything to do with me. I mean, modern psychology constructed on that premise. In fact, I would say 85, 90% of dream work goes in that direction.
Yeah.
It's just that not only we, because we often will see the person that looks like me in the dream, and then, of course, the question comes up. If I'm seeing myself in the dream, who's dreaming the dream? It's the who, the many that are dreaming the dream, that becomes very, very interested. And I think for me, when Jung comes forward with his work and his process of active imagination, I think he goes right there. Hey, let's listen to the others that are participating in our life, that are animating, illuminating our life, and they make a presence in dream and imagination.
Yeah. It's it's so interesting that um those two qualities, the two worlds we live in, and how uh and how that strategic mind, that's kind of like I like to call it, the
Yep.
alpha male or the strategic mind versus the curious mind. And one of the things we talk about in our dream tending world is this, what we call the rhizomic nature of psyche. And that's like kind of a big, crazy word. But really, all I just think about a mushroom, like mushrooms, base. That's all I think about is mushrooms, is that, mushrooms are like, there's like a whole fungal network going on in any forest or in any kind of natural setting, really. And there's all sorts of stuff going on in the underground. And there's all sorts of communications happening
Mhm.
from all the different kind of players in the garden or the pasture or the meadow or whatever it is, but we're kind of only seeing the plants above, like,
Yeah.
this kind of external part of it. So that's the way I kind of love to imagine it. But that neural conversation going on is how I understand what you were just talking about, of like all the figures, or the dream is dreaming us, or it's like, because when you look at nature, nature is not just the tree and the thing, like the things we can see. It is the totality of the conversation, of the ecosystem. And so psyche in some way is like that. And a dream, what has been so fun to understand is that, sure, the ego wants to go marching in and look up what does a lion mean, or or why is it raining, or what is the airplane, or something like that. But the way you approach it, and the way depth psychology approaches it all, there's this that it's about entering it with curious mind
Yes.
and getting to see that everything is alive in
Yeah.
it. Everything is
Mm.
alive. It's it's I've watched people in your seminars, in the earlier beginner seminars. I've watched you work with them with dreams and invite them into that kind of seeing. And it's so interesting because there's a palpable shift that happens
Mhm.
inside the room when you do that. Um, could you talk a little bit about, like, how you not only just approach dreamers, but anyone, even the tech guys? Like, what is that? What do you have to walk people into? What's the invitation there?
Yeah, the invitation is to open curiosity, for sure, and bring something of imagination in, because then immediately we're tapping into, as you're noticing, the web or the tapestry of that imaginal quality of being human, really. And it is like mushrooms or the redwood trees with all the roots touching each other. Each figure in a dream, the landscape of the dream, the characters of the dream, the emotions in the dream, the activity of the dream, each has a life of its own. And the real curious thing has to do with the figures in the dream, whether it be a landscape or a character or an activity or a feeling, they have stories to tell. And if we can drop down and move away from our diagnostic or analytical or scientific mind, that kind of reasonable mind, it's important. It is, forever we'll come back. But if we can drop down for just a moment and listen and experience everything in the dream with a voice of its own, we discover each has a story to tell. And how great is that to listen in and hear the stories that are coming forward, not from all of our training and background only, but from the genius that is from the organicity of the psyche or from the dream time. And that is, I think, in the world of today, is the most untapped of all. Yeah, musicians get it because when they go in the spontaneity working with their music, right? Poets get it. And not just people writing poetry that we would imagine, right? Also, when we're working with everything. There's a person that I'm working with now who's a programmer. So you would think, oh my, a computer. So it's writing programs. You would think, oh my goodness, well, that certainly can't count. That's got to be reductive. That's got to be systematized. And yet, when he starts to work with his programming and develop that, he's listening to something alive within that orchestrates that helps him, bring a bunch of different parts together and formulates into something very new, different, very creative. It's really, really remarkable to watch. And I think that happens in all places in life.
Yeah. I'm always trying to figure this stuff out. And we may get in the weeds a little bit here, but we're going to take you with us, listener. I always think about how, story
Mm-hmm.
and characters. I mean, dreams are that. Like we go to sleep and we have this thing that happens, this movie that happens inside of us. And yet also, so much of therapy, and we've understood, especially the last 20 years, this idea or 25 years about the importance of narrative therapy, that we're all kind of constructing stories constantly. And that's how we're making sense of our reality around us. And that in some ways they believe that the brain is wired or constructed in a way that this is the manifestation of exactly of how we make sense of the world. And it's no crazy notion. It's like that. What do we do all day? We watch other people's stories. Like we're always involved in stories. We're watching them on screens. We're telling them or whatever. And it is so interesting to me because when I'm doing this work and part of the work that we do in this realm is we do dream work. We go inside a dream and we actually enter it with this different kind of consciousness, this curious mind consciousness. But also we can learn to do it through something called the dig,
Mm-hmm.
which is a process where it's like a waking dream, where we have kind of a storyline built within ourselves where we're going to meet some figures. Sometimes they're dream figures, sometimes they're other aspects of the psyche. And I really do think it is fascinating that just hanging out with a dream figure,
Yes.
encountering one or encountering some spontaneous image that comes up in a waking dream, the dig, that my whole approach, physiology, um, memory, perspective is it's like I've entered a different reality.
Yeah.
because I'm in contact with that. Yeah.
Well, that reality is restorative and
Mm-hmm.
generative. And
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned physio, because we've done so much work now with people with, you know, disease syndromes, just different physiological challenges. When we're in that place, it is extraordinary how instructive and useful that is. Everything begins to shift. And this is not new information. People have been doing this for thousands of years, but it's forgotten. So, in
Yeah.
conjunction with modern medicine in this aspect, right, it's important really to allow the inner resources to also come forward and to, in turn, everything from the immune system to the healing internal processes get ignited, get jump started, and it's just so helpful. I remember a time when that was separate. The medical establishment say, oh, no, 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 that's going to be just, you're going to take people away from what they need, which is proper medical treatment. Now it's different, right? Now there's a way of bringing these two together and really complement. In fact, it's called complementary medicine, and really
Yeah.
bringing the resources of the psyche, the resources of the spontaneity, and curiosity is the key. Curiosity is what opens that. Carl Jung, which we mentioned, there's a misnomer actually, because he coined that term active imagination. And so we
Yeah.
imagine that as we are going to now go into imagination. It'll be guided imagery, well, really active imagination. And the concept of the dig that you just mentioned comes from the other side of that. What he was really talking about, as it comes out now again and again,
In the
is
Red Book,
in the
we know
Red Book,
now.
yes, that is
Yes.
now out, when he finally released all that, or he didn't, but his family did, his journals from all those years, those decades, is that the imagination itself, active imagination, the imagination itself is what's active. And if we bring a witnessing presence to its activity, then there's a very different way of being positioned in relation to that. And I'll do that every morning now. I would say 6 out of 7, 5 out of 7,
Yeah.
depending on life and challenges. But I'll bring myself into a process. And it's not esoteric. It really isn't. It's just present time, right? And everybody will have their own version. But I'll bring myself in to a place where there's a portal, which is just another way of saying an opening into the imagining processes. And I join a troop, a traveling group, right? It's just not the ego going, but I take the moment in time. It's an elder, it's a grandparent, it is a mentor. There's some very supportive companions that we can travel with. All journeys. We need our packing list. We need we do need the company of others is so helpful, the crew, so to speak. So it's not esoteric. It's really present centered. And then we journey, and we can just take those moments, even 20 minutes in the morning, where we're just allowing ourselves to surrender, let go, breathe more deeply, and get curious as to what we'll discover, what touches us. And of course, now we've done lots of research, from qualitative and quantitative research, that shows that when we are in that process, something very, very different happens inside. And as a result, what happens during my day on the outside really changes. That's the key. When I start there, because I do a lot of administrative work and I do a lot of from financial analysis to this to that. When
All
I
the all the entrepreneur stuff that we have to do.
Oh my goodness, yeah, from the tasks of being in daily life to my relationships with my family, children, my wife. When I start there, I'm open in a different way of an access to considerable resources. When I don't start there, I'm on overdrive and I'm really in that zoom, which is okay at times, but it's a burnout at some point.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really important part of this work. There's so many practices that people can do. They can do breath work, they can do yoga, they can do multiple kinds of meditation,
Yes.
TM, mindfulness, all that stuff. And really what all that does is the same thing that we're talking about is it gets you out of kind of the strategic overdrive mode of analytical problem solving all the time, and helps you get back into your body first of
Yes.
all, the physiology and the somatic experience of being here, because we get so cut off from the head up, right, in life. And then the added gift of these practices, the dig and the dream work, is that there is this inner community that we create
Hmm.
with this ragtag group of figures, and and you know, and people are not don't we all talk. We know everyone knows about the inner child, or the idea of an inner mother or a father. There's a lot of people doing internal family system work now, which is so amazing to see how popular that is.
Yes.
And that is just that too drops you down into a space and allows you to have a psychodynamic conversation with the parts of your psyche that keep you safe, keep you healthy and grounded in a sense of sanity. It also helps you unpack some of the early childhood stuff, which, as
Yeah.
you know, is, like you said, is usually about 60% of the work we do.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been a
Yeah.
marriage family therapist, a clinical psychologist. That I spent a life in that field. I'll say this, what you said, though, that inner group. I mean, I'm going to, jump up and down about this because that's what I talk about everywhere. To connect with that inner community. Oh my goodness, right? And to have a daily practice where those are the figures, and not just family members, not just familiars. These are figures that come with and through imagination.
Yep.
They're dream images, right? They're places that have been comforting for us for a long, long time, right? They're figures that are supportive. It's really a praxis that allows us to stay connected. When I am on, and I do a lot of speaking, so, I just got back from China just a while back, in China, the auditorium is 2,000 people, right? So,
Wow.
yeah, of course, right? It is.
Yeah.
Everything's way bigger. But on and on it goes. When I'm up on stage, whether it's at the United Nations addressing General Assembly, or whether it's in a dream workshop, or whether it's A, B, or C, when I'm there and I take the time to first connect with that inner community, the we, not just only the I is part of the we, right? And when we are that connected and I'm up at the podium and I'm speaking, I have a very different, as you said, it's a body experience, somatic, and two, I feel the support of an inner community. And how great is that to have the support of an inner community alongside connecting with an outer community of friends and mentors and people and the folks and that's what I love, is to have communities where people will be able to have the time and the place and the support to share with one another inner experience and their outer experience. That is a blessing, because then we can go into the world in a very different way with support.
Yeah. As a kids, we just knew about this. Like, I think about the number of stuffed animals I had as a little
Yes.
girl
Yeah.
and how they were my village,
Yeah.
and they each had their personalities and they each kind of provided some sort of relationship to me, some part of me or some part of the world. And so you can kind of liken it to that in some way. But what I find fascinating about the work is, and it's hard for people to kind of understand it until you go into it and see it happen. The immediate spontaneity of a figure coming forward in it from a dream. Maybe you're
Yes.
working with a dream, or even just sometimes I just say to a client, um, like, if there's some sort of energy in their body, like a tightness or a fear or an anxiety, and we give it a shape, and then it'll come into a form, and then suddenly I'll say, well, let's talk to it.
Mhm.
I think it probably has some information for you, because that's how our approach is, which we
Yeah.
see this element within us, which we think is, oh, just a piece of figment of our imagination. But suddenly it has information and intelligence and a whole life of experience that our very narrow ego doesn't have. And suddenly now this person is having this conversation, and usually the homework I give is, every day now that we've kind of opened this new relationship, you've got a new friendship with a jackhammer. It literally could be a jackhammer, you guys. Um, how about you check in with him or her, whatever it is, a couple times a day. And definitely in the morning before you kind of start your day and look at your phone, do that and just see how that feels. And then I'll have them report back to me, usually via text 3 days later, 3 or 4 days later. And they will always, if they're new clients, they will always say things like, okay, I know this sounds ridiculous, but that's how
Yeah,
it
right.
always
Yeah.
starts.
How many times have I heard that? This
I
is
know it's
really
crazy.
crazy.
I know this is
And
crazy. Right. And
yeah, yeah.
all that anxiety is gone. Like
Yeah,
I
exactly.
just hand it over to Jackhammer.
Yeah.
Or if I'm worried about,
Mhm,
going to speak on a stage, like Jackhammer comes up with me or whatever it is.
mhm,
And that for me is like, okay, whatever this is, I
mhm.
can't explain it all yet, but I know that there's a tangible, concrete shift
Yes.
in one's being
Mhm.
and one's ability then to walk into the world to be that person that we all ache to be, which is authentic, relaxed,
Mhm.
open, and of service in conversation with. So yeah, I love that moment in my day when I have that
Yes,
moment with clients.
absolutely. And in the world of today, it could not be more important, right? And, one of the things you notice, Kelly, is that it's really, almost impossible to be really authentically curious and anxious at the same time. The reciprocal. Or
It's so
really,
true.
really curious and depressed, right? So curiosity and touching into imagination really supports people. And so many children, oh my gosh, I can talk about I'm writing a children's book right now, actually, with my daughter. So many children are feeling that kind of isolation. It's almost epidemic in many cultures, and certainly it's starting to happen here and now. To remind and to nurture that natural, just as you were saying with those little stuffed animals, it was there. It is there. It's innate to us from the beginning to reconnect with that quality of imaginal play, right? Child's play, but not childishness, that kind of imaginal play as an adult. It really is the quote, medicine, end quote, in relation to anxiety, in relation to isolation, um, feeling depressed. I call that in the book Imagination Matrix. When we're doing that work, we're actually increasing our imaginal intelligence.
Mm,
Yeah, different than intellectual IQ intelligence, different than embodied intelligence, although very similar, different than AI, artificial intelligence.
yeah,
Yeah,
certainly.
it is. It's an imaginal intelligence, and as that increases, that quality of IQ increases. Something very, very different happens in a person and in their relationships with others, which is so helpful.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because, these screens that we are all in relationship with now,
Mhm.
and the content inside of it, all I think about, like during whenever there's a crisis in my life, I'm always suddenly on social media a lot, or if
Yes.
there's a crisis in the world, because I'm looking for connection and community.
Yes.
And you get a little bit of it, but the way these technologists have constructed all of this is that it's not there's something of a false thread that you're following towards it. Every once in a while you'll get a hit with a person and be like, "Oh yes, we have a moment," or whatever. And yet when I drop down into this work and do dream work or a dig with myself even, like you were saying, when I come out of it, then when I enter the world, I am in a different state of mind
Yes.
where I am connecting to people from a different place and a different level. And you see it immediately in the other person you're connecting with too.
Yes.
We both drop into an authentic moment. The mask is off in some way. Um, it's this curiosity is, God, it's like there's so many people are trying to solve so much. And what you said about that, like you can't be depressed or anxious and curious at the same time.
It's very hard to do that, to be
It
at the
it
same
really
time, you know?
it really is because
Mm,
both of those things put you into a survival mode so
yeah.
much, or you're just trying to like pull yourself away from it all. Um, so I mean, you've spent 50 years of your life plus in this world doing this work. The world is at, I mean, it has been, but every day it feels like it's even at more of an interesting, terrifying at times tipping point. How how can we use this work to help the collective? And what are you noticing about the collective and kind of the connection between this work and the collective? What's emerging, what's needed? um what are you experiencing around that in your work and personally?
Okay, yeah. Well, I've thought a lot about it, as so many of us have. And, the world is really, the way we're going is challenging in so many ways, regardless of the politics of the day. Um,
Absolutely.
but in addition to the politics of the day, there are wars that are here, there, and everywhere. Perhaps they've been just so for human experience, and too, with what's possible now, it's incredibly scary, as we all know. It's the parade of terribles. We know that the ecology is, with the sixth extinction, we just see it, we feel it. I'm living here in California. The fires are forever now getting worse. The weather conditions in so many parts on the globe. So threat is everywhere, and the question becomes: all right, yes, do we lean back into rational thinking, policy formation? Yes, of course. Do we really access, the best minds and the best people to really think things through from different ways? Yes, of course. And something else, I think, is being asked at this point in time. And I'm going to share what I think conceptually, and then give a concrete example. Uh, Conceptually, I just think that where we're going is imagining, where the world is going is asking something different of us. And it's true with dream work too. It's just not, what does this dream mean? What does this dream have to do with me? Okay, good, important, helpful. Of course, I spent my life considering those questions, supporting that. The third part of that, though, what is the dream's desire? In other words, what is the sense of becoming? What is the genius, the possibility, the hints of the future that are offered actually in almost every dream, for us personally, for us in our small community, and I think too for the world. What we call in dream tending the world's dreaming, always. As we were talking, it's an animated world, right? The creatures, the things, the trees. There's a dream, and we need listening, and it comes through a dream when we open our ears, get curious, and listen in that way. Where that becomes important, though, now, I don't even think important, let me just say urgent, is because um, the world is escalating in terms of its threat. Our humanity is being threatened, I think, by the overuse of technology. Certainly, I'm actually an advocate of technology. It's just that the too muchness, then we experience the monster in the machine, which is what people are scared of, right? The too muchness. Certainly, children are being caught in that. And for example, policy formation. So I mentioned the environment. I was in a city that I was working with planners, people on the planning staff, and their commission, and they were worried about the too muchness of air pollution. Okay, how are we going to solve this? I mean, honestly, they were the best policy formation people that they were there, the scientists, the experts, and they were going round and round and round, and things were not getting better. And I'm not a savior. It was not anything like that at all. All I did was introduce something just a bit different. Instead of starting the meeting with reviewing all the analyses, the projections, the blue papers, the things that were there, we started somewhere different. I said, I'm just curious. Something brought you into this profession from the beginning. Let's think back. What was it? What was the originating impulse? Oh, all of a sudden, people's eyes open. Curiosity comes into the room. And in fact, when you go there, let's think of something that's touched you in the last week that was more imaginal than tangible. And it really doesn't matter. It's not like a psychology 101 class. It opens imagination and invites that into the room. And oh my goodness, what started to happen and what started coming forward. I've done that in a planning commission. I do that with tech firms when I'm asked to be a consultant, just to get people into that imaginal place. There we feel and re-experience the seeds of becoming. And I think it's really important now to touch in and to hear into that. So an additional resource to everything else is imagination. And I'm thinking, hey, tapping in, I'm thinking for myself, all right, what will I be doing next?
Yeah.
And I have my, I was quite the activist when I was younger.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
what it
You're of
is.
that generation. You were
I
right in
was
the
that
thick of it,
generation, going
man.
down to the streets and doing that and protesting and getting into a more or less reactive place, but it was generative, and I still forever, that's never going to be not part of my life. But in addition to that, what else is coming forward that is being asked of me now in my life? And I don't think that's going to be found in the same old, or it's not going to be found on my analysis. It'll be offered, I think, through imagination and through access to dream and imaginal ways of experiencing.
Yeah. And really what you're tapping into is when we tap into the imaginal, and I love the distinction between the imaginal versus the tangible. It's such an interesting way to hold those two spaces. But what happens when we're in the imaginal is the dualistic thinking goes away.
Uh-huh.
And it's almost as if it's erased in some way. It's so interesting. And we're able, and this other thing that happens too, which is sometimes it'll show up and it'll be like, oh, well, how is this about me? Or how is this going to fix me? Like I do that too. I go into my dreams and at first I need to like sort through my daddy issues for sure.
Yeah, of course. That's important.
But and the way you teach this, it's like, yes, do that
Mhm.
and do the symbolic
Yes.
stuff. And then we've got that out of the way.
Yeah.
And that part of us that needs to do that is satisfied and can calm down so that we can go into this even interestingly bigger room
Mhm.
where we are not the center of the universe. We are just a part of it all. And when I hear you talking about this, what I'm hearing is the more we can, yes, satisfy obviously the parts that need to be satisfied, but then also a yes anding of going into a space where we can enter politics, policy,
Yes.
relationships, whatever it is, from this we place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a we that doesn't sacrifice our ability to have a nice house or whatever it is that we're worried about that we're going to have to give up. There's so much tension in our country between the individual and the collective. There always has been. And yet both are necessary, as we know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's such a beautiful invitation, because when we go into the we space,
Yes.
and whatever we experience in there, whatever information we get, first of all, it happens on a level where we may get cognitive information like, oh, that's an interesting thing, or that's something, but something else happens there. It's what I tell people. I said, when we do the depth work together, I said, there's no efforting in that space.
Mm-hmm.
The integration just happens.
Yes.
The plug into the creative space just happens. There's no in it, And there feels like there's so much efforting always in the world to solve, to fix, to tear down, whatever it is. And yet when we go into this generative curiosity realm, whatever it is, we come back, it really is the hero's journey. We really do come back with some sort of treasure
We do.
that's intangible, but completely changes every bit of our interaction then with
Yeah.
each other in life.
And we come home to ourselves. It's a
Ah,
homecoming. And
yeah,
with the we, it's such a sense of deep belonging. We're belonging
yes,
to an inner community and then an outer community. We all, I think, are gifted with an innate genius. And it doesn't mean we're going to be Einstein, for goodness sakes, but we are gifted with an innate genius that opens to our authenticity, to who I am really, truly, and to allow each of us to be part of that inner community, the we. It supports that becoming. It's part of who we are. It's an inheritance that once it comes forward, all kinds of things can happen. The way we are parenting changes, and we can come into that differently. The way we are with colleagues shifts, and we can really be with one another in ways that are very, the word that you're using again and again is generative and
yeah.
creative. And there's so much value added there. And honestly, we get the job done more effectively. It's not
We
either
it,
or. Yeah.
it's astounding how being able to daily move into this space, how then, like you were saying, I go into a team admin meeting, the bureaucracy part of
Mhm.
having to be a creative entrepreneur in the world. But even like my creative self,
Yes.
like, accessing just the transition between daily life and then needing to drop down into to writing because I'm back to my writing again and just how quickly I that transition happens. Because it is the transition time that's so tricky for us humans,
Yes.
because we're so persona oriented and role oriented in the world. And it really is it surprises me every time I do this stuff and it just something else comes forward. I remember us sitting around, I don't remember which circle we were in, but it was in the last few years. And we really started talking about the longing to belong.
Ah, yes.
And you emphasize a lot about, follow the longing. Follow There's something in a body that happens with longing. And and I think that for people who are listening to this, like that energy, that call, but that's the call right there is the longing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you keep coming back to the hero's journey and the heroine's journey and the calling, and that evokes Joseph Campbell, of course. And so we must mention that it's not all romantic and idealized because we as
Yeah.
humans, as people, we feel the pain, the suffering, the grief, the sadness. Oh my gosh, the horrific. Even of course, dreams often are remembered because they're nightmarish, right? And so part of that community of we, right, has to do with learning the art, the craft of when those figures come, the ones that are most frightening, you know, uh, to notice how, when we tend to them, particularly in the community of supportive figures, how they too begin to, what's a big word here, transmute. They begin to
Yeah.
change. And they often become some of our most valuable allies, not our, when we're caught with fear of one sort or the next, whether it's failure or rejection, or the list goes on to the, many. But when we identify them, just as you're noticing, give them a name, put them into form, first have the protection and the support of those companions, those new befriended figures that are now part of the inner community, it gives those figures also a chance to evolve. And they've been halted in a very fixed way for a long, long time often. That's what Joe Campbell did when he was working with Lucas, and Lucas gives Joseph the credit again and again, that Darth Vader image forever for little ones now, it's just so many iterations now that all through the generations, it's everywhere. But it's that Darth Vader figure, right? That when
Yeah.
unmasked, when the veil comes off, and you have the support, the Luke Skywalker, the
Hmm.
Obi-Wan, Yoda, all these inner companions, when you have those figures and you then are with the one that's most frightening, it gives that one an opportunity to reveal itself in its more generative way. And of course, what we know in that story is that it becomes a very important, a pivotal, important figure. hmm So it's important that way.
Yeah, and as I've spoken with other people on this podcast, a few of my guests before you, we've talked a lot about the demonization of our fellow humans, and boy, are we in it here in America.
Yeah.
And how easy it is to drop the word deplorable
Mm.
onto another human being,
Mhm.
and the work we do as depth psychologists, we never take, like you said, um, the the threat of the shadow, however it shows up, and we know, and most people do know that, and then because we can't handle that, we'll project that outward
Yeah.
onto the world, and of course, there's real threat out there. We're not,
Yes.
Pollyannas or anything like that. But so much of the threat is the volume is turned up through this inability to even sit with our own inner deplorables.
Exactly. Yeah. If that's going on inside of me, I'm going to see it out there and it's going to be amplified for sure that. So we need to
Yeah.
come to terms with those figures internally. And this process that we're talking about is I've worked with vets coming back from wars. That's where I started. So I know what it is. So I've
Mm.
had direct experience working with the most difficult traumatic types of experiences. When we can really reframe that and really get to know what the who, the figure behind the terror, and
Yeah.
then to deepen a relationship with that one with support and protection of the other inner community members. It's a game changer. It really is. And then it's less likely we're going to project it out onto other people or other policies or politics and so on.
Yeah. I mean, the world is messy enough without us
That is true. Yes.
messing it up more. Uh, we're out of time here today, and maybe you and I will get a chance later in the year. We can come back and go into, maybe we could do some dream work here or something. I
Oh,
mean,
wouldn't that be something?
that would be kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so, and I know that people can find Stephen and his work at dreamtending.com. Stephen has always multiple ways for you to enter into his world and to learn the art, the science and the art of working with the deep imagination. I highly recommend his new book, The Deep Imagination Matrix. It really does unpack it in such a way and really presents all of this so that it's not woo-woo, it's not magical thinking, it's very grounded. Like here's something that we are already hardwired to do. Let's do it. Like let's bring all of our stuff forward. Like let's bring every tool we have in the toolbox to help humanity. So check out Stephen's stuff. And Stephen, is there any last words that you would like to say here today to this audience?
Yes, I think. I think I'm inspired by the need and also the rendering of this new children's book. And it's offering kids, little ones. The first book is between the ages of 0 and 6. Okay.
And six.
And
Nice.
6, yeah. Well, to keep imagination alive, really, to notice kids and notice how they, as you said at the very beginning, with those stuffed little animals following back the breadcrumbs. I remember our daughter at the beginning. We thought she was having friends over until at one point I opened the door and she's talking to all her imaginal figures, right? A breadcrumb, right? And to allow kids and their parents in the home setting to really keep curiosity alive, imagination alive, and to listen. And I think what we've been talking about is just so helpful. So the one thing I would offer to people that are listening, take 5 minutes, 10 minutes after listening to us, simply take a walk, whether it's in the cityscape or in a nature place, right? Focus, you can go that way, peripheral vision, soft eyes, and notice something that makes a claim on your curiosity, on your attention, and follow that. Allow yourself 3 to 5 minutes just to follow curiosity and notice what happens somatically in the body and also in terms of your quality of life.
Yeah. Oh, that's I love it. Instant little mini moment
Many
from
moments.
mini moments from Stephen Aizenstat will change your day, will change your world instantly. Thank you. Thanks, Steve, for being here and hanging out with me for an hour and helping me introduce this amazing inner landscape that you've introduced into my life and have changed my life. So I'm really so grateful.
Thank you, Kelly. It's been a pleasure, truly.